drip, drip, drip. I found that my seams were leaking, or maybe just one seam. And so here's how you put seam seal on. Very little. This is a case where putting on too much is not better. Just put tiny bit on there. Might actually be so little you're having trouble seeing it. And then use gloves or a rag to rub it into the threads. Try to work it underneath the seam as it's folded over. And if you put too much on, and this is where I'm sharing my mistakes, if you put too much on, it all flakes off. You get it all over your tent, all over your equipment until it's all flaked off. Push it in there. Try to get it underneath in the threads. Now, anything that's on top really doesn't help. You take a paper towel, just wipe off all that excess. You don't need any of that excess on there. And this helps push it down into the threads also. All right, and with this product, it's recommended that you let it dry 3 to 6 hours. So I'm just gonna let this sit out for 3 to 6 hours. Welcome to my backyard studio that's doubling as a seam seal test. Last time I used this, we had 4 inches of rain in one night. And I did get some water in the tent. And I looked into, options, and I do think that maybe after 100 nights camping in here, one of the seals may have a leak. I'm not sure. So I tested it and found that there was a leak around the head of the tent, and put some seam seal on it, and I'm running a test. I'll run the sprinkler on it for a couple hours and look inside. I put some paper towels in the bottom so I can see where the water leaks in. Water will change the paper towel. Even if the water evaporates out of the paper towel, you can still tell that it's been wet. So we're just going to do this for a while and report on the results in a couple hours. Well, I just did a 2-hour hike. We have a dam near our house. Walked down to the dam and back. Did the stairs at the dam, and here I am back. And the water was running down there for 2 hours. Tons of water on top. Now let's open it up and we'll look inside. All right, you look all around. I put paper towels in the corners. Tents will often leak in the corners. I put one in the middle just to catch stuff. But you can see there is nothing that's wet inside. And it's been raining via the hose and the sprinkler for 2 hours. And check this out. I mean, we have water. Now what I did, won't be able to see it maybe because it's wet, but I put seam sealer all along this seam down to here, and this seam down to here. Because when I did have my leak, it was coming in right here. Underneath this feels dry. Kind of hard to tell, but I can tell you it feels dry. It is here on the edge, but it was not leaking in through the screen. That's not where it was coming in. It was coming in through these seams. So now I'm going to bring out my waterproofing spray and spray the whole tent. It also protects it from UV damage. This is what's recommended. You spray it on evenly over the whole tent, and then wipe it off with a wet rag. Where am I going to get water to wet my rag? Oh yeah, top of the tent. So I'm going to do this next, but it's a two-handed thing, so I'm not going to video it, and hopefully I'll never have a leak again. Well, you can see all the white droplets. It came out as a real thin spray, but it's showing up with some white droplets. And it says to wait for a couple minutes and then wipe it off with my wet rag. And I did get a wet rag by soaking up the water out of the middle there. I will want to look at that and see if I set up the tent a little differently, if I can prevent that puddle. That puddle just is asking for trouble, I think. All right, so I'll wait a couple minutes and I'll wipe it off. This was supposed to be a very short and simple video. I recognized that I had a seam on my tent that was leaking. I would show you how to use seam sealer. Take me maybe 15 minutes to put the video together. I get my tent fixed and you get your questions answered about seam sealing. Lots of people ask questions about them, and as you saw earlier, it's not that tough to do. As long as you don't make the same mistakes that I did, put it on too much and then it flakes off forever. So this thing blew way out of proportion, and here's kind of what happened. I've been setting up my grandchildren for years to go camping with me. As you saw maybe in my Ice Age Trail Lapland Peak segment video, that I've been feeding them freeze-dried desserts, making apple rings with cinnamon and honey on them. They really like the fruit leather. I'm doing all of these things because these are the meals, these are the foods that Farfar eats when he's camping. And I'm Farfar. As you saw in that video, Farfar means father's father in Swedish. I'm Farfar. You know me as John's dad, and I am John's dad as well. So we got it all arranged, set it up, got the kids set up in their tent. They set up their own tent for the most part by themselves, a little bit of help from me. Pushing in the stakes in the ground, it's kind of tough for them, but otherwise got set up. During the night, we got 4 inches of rain, thunderstorm, lightning, wind that was unbelievable. One of us even started crying. So during the night in my tent, I got dripped on once in a while. It's real unusual. I really haven't had that happen before. Drip, 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 drip. Not a lot. When I woke up, I was expecting my sleeping bag to be all wet where it had been dripped on. And it wasn't, it was dry. But in the bottom of the tent, I had 2 or 3 liters of water underneath me. So I'm thinking, okay, so it dripped, maybe it leaked and ran down the inside of the rain fly. I didn't know where that water came from, but certainly a problem, but it's gonna be caused by either water coming in through the screen or the seam around the screen. I used my backyard water testing area, set up the tent, I ran the sprinkler on it for a couple hours, and it did leak, and I found the leak was in the seam around the screen, not in the screen itself. And so I showed you in the video earlier how to seam seal that. But that little drip, it was just tablespoons worth of water came in over 2 hours. No way did that explain the liters of water that were in the bottom of my tent. So that meant the water was probably coming in through the bottom. So as you'll see, I set up the tent on the patio, filled the bottom with water, and looked for little holes. And as you'll see, the darkness starts getting bigger and bigger where the water's leaking. I was expecting maybe I'd have 1, maybe 2 holes in the bottom, something like that. There were no rips, there was nothing you could actually see. In fact, I never did see any of the 15 or more holes that I patched, but I could see where the water was leaking. Even looking at them, bringing the material up and looking at it, I could not see the hole. There was no reason to think there was a hole there, except for the water leaking in. So I got those fixed. The reason it happened, it was that the ground we'd set up on was kind of boggy, kind of wet, and for sure with the 4 inches of rain, the ground was so soft, it just came in through those holes. I just never had that problem since the 1970s when I was camping with canvas shelter halves where there was no bottom to the tent. If it rained, you were sleeping in the mud. So this was not a lot of fun. And what you'll see next is how I found those holes and patched them. You'll see the bottom. I'll show you a picture here of the bottom of the tent. You can't see all of the holes, all the patches anyway, because I used clear patches on some of them. The black ones you can see. Now you can see that where the patches are kind of lined up on that picture is where I sit or where I move, where I have my backpack. And so I've got to look at that to figure out how do I protect the bottom of the tent from the inside, because that's what's causing these holes, is me moving around. My tent stakes never go in the tent, my boots never go in the tent. As far as I know, nothing sharp ever goes in there. So it might just be simple abrasion of my weight on top of ground, on the earth, whatever's underneath it. I always use the footprint I've never gone without the footprint. I know that adds weight, but it's my intention to try to protect the bottom of that tent. So anyway, follow along and you'll see what I did. The amount of water in my tent didn't seem to be explained by the hole or the leaking seam. So I put water in the tent, and every place where you see it's dark, that's a leak. So I found where the hole is and I marked it with a magic marker, and I'll have to dry this out and put a patch every place I found a hole. When I initially started filling the bathtub floor of the tent with water, I was expecting to find maybe one, maybe two holes, and I was going to be able to easily mark them. When I saw all the holes being created, I got out a Sharpie and that marked one hole. As soon as it got wet, it stopped working. I got a regular magic marker that never worked underwater. So I headed over to the local REI here where I used to work, hoping they had some kind of right underwater pen. And they didn't actually, not for what I was looking for. They've got some right in the rain stuff, but not the right underwater that I was looking for. They did have a suggestion though that I go to an office supply store and look for a space pen. And here's the packaging that I got. It's a very heavy pen. I for sure would not want to carry it with me. It looks like a normal pen, but when you pick it up, it's heavy. I'll bet it's an ounce or two all by itself. And it doesn't bend at all, so it'll be real fragile. It's not something you'd want in your backpack, but it did work. As soon as I could see a little black hole starting to form where the tent bottom was leaking, I just reached in with the pen, did a little X right where that hole was starting. I never did actually see any of the holes I patched. They were just way too small. But the leaking water created that black circle. I was able to mark it, and eventually, like I said, I was able to retest it until I had no more leaks. The patches I used were tenacious tape patches. I picked those up at REI as well. And they come with the rounded corners already. They're rectangular, but they have rounded corners, and that's real important so there's nothing to catch and pull it up. You want those patches to stay on there. Sorry, my neighbor's mowing the grass. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm filling up the bathtub floor of the tent again with water. You can see all of the black rectangle patches. I did use some clear ones. You probably can't see those. I think this should fix all of the holes in the bottom of the tent. But I'm going to fill it up here. Not fill it up. I'm going to put a lot of water in it and just make sure there's no additional leaks and that all my patches are working. Don't put too much water in. Water is very heavy, and I wouldn't be surprised if you could do some permanent damage to your tent. So be a little careful with that. Well, this 5-minute video that it was supposed to be actually took several days. I had the tent set up here in the water testing center that whole time. The process of putting water in the tent, marking with a space pen all of the holes I could find, drying the tent thoroughly, patching the holes, and repeating the process stretched out forever. And I'll bet you'll never guess what happened while the tent was sitting here. If you have a bird poop on your tent or have other dirt on it, just take a wet rag, no soap or anything, gently wash it off. You don't need anything abrasive. Don't use any of your normal household detergents. If this doesn't take it off, get some tech wash, something especially intended for cleaning our camping gear. Even though it's pretty rugged, we put a lot of abuse on our stuff, it's actually pretty fragile. And there we go. So this one I just did with warm water. Don't need the tech wash. And so we do, like I was saying, it is fragile. Any kind of abrasion could really hurt it. You just want the soft wet rag.